I got super freaking frustrated. I should never say frickin'. Okay, I got super freaking frustrated. Freaking isn't better either. Why can't I say, can I say? Can I say? Hey everyone, my name is Liv and welcome to The Leopard Lodge, a channel dedicated to creative pursuits in the home. Today I'll be working on some wall decor. I found the inspiration for this wall decor on Pinterest. I was in a deep Pinterest hole for wall decor. They were giving me new suggestion, as they do. We were deep in. I kept seeing these circles that were wrapped in yarn. I saw a bunch of different versions of them and they were really, really beautiful and I got kind of obsessed with them. Now, the original piece is by a decor company in Paris called Wilo, or maybe Wilo for the French. Wilo and Grove? I'm not sure, I don't speak French. And these pieces retail for quite a bit of money. Obviously not something I could afford myself, but I was thinking I could probably make something similar to that and it would still be really cool. I was kind of like, oh, I'll get some embroidery hoops, I'll wrap some yarn around it, and I'll call it a day. And it'll be super easy. Except, no. The original pieces had about 2 inches of depth in the hoop, which gave it more literal depth and also visual interest. So I went in search of something that I could use. I found a couple of options, but they were pretty expensive and it just, wasn't in the cards for me to spend that much money on a project like this, even though it would still be less expensive than the original pieces. It would still cost me well over $100 to make something like this myself. So I put the project in the back of my mind. I kept thinking about it, but I didn't know what I was gonna do about this whole depth situation. And then while I was kind of marinating on this idea, I also came across Drew from Lone Fox's video that he did on the same project over a year ago. It was just a small part of his video, but he also worked on this project and he did a similar thing where he wrapped the embroidery hoops with yarn, but he still didn't have the depth that I was looking for. I decided to take his inspiration. I think he did a great job in the video and I will link it below if I can find it, but I still really wanted that depth. And it was driving me crazy because I still couldn't figure it out. And then one day, the idea came to me, veneer edge banding. So this is it. It's birch, 2 inches, and you can see it's all rolled up. I was like, oh, I can wrap this around the embroidery hoop and then I'll have the depth that I'm looking for. Perfect. So that is what we are going to do. And I did a sample one, just kind of see how it went. And I think it turned out really well. I wood glued this and did all of this with a hot glue gun, but it really bothers me that you can see this inner ring here. It's just like, it's so close, it's so close. And also I use a hot glue gun and I can kind of see the hot glue. That's really bothering me. So I have come up with some fixes for those and we're gonna try it out and we're gonna see if it works. Hopefully it will. So yeah, let's get to it. I have a 8-inch embroidery hoop and a 4-inch embroidery hoop. I think I can get 4 and 4 out of this. So the first thing I did was measure the inside and outside of my embroidery hoop. The easiest way to do this is to put the embroidery hoop down on a flat surface and then wheel the tape measure around it so that it stays in place. The inside is a little bit trickier, so I use some clips to hold it in place. Make sure you do this for all of your hoops that you are using. Add 1/4 inch to each measurement so that there's a little bit of overlap on each piece. Next, I used a metal bristled brush to paint wood glue on the inside of each embroidery hoop. Then I fastened one end of the veneer to the embroidery hoop with a clip and then Wrapped the veneer edge banding around the rest of the hoop, securing it in place in a few points with more clips. I would highly suggest getting some binder clips for this project. I already have these on hand, but binder clips would have done so much better. Okay, cut to now when I finally got that to work. A factory defect that was labeled as an 8-inch hoop, but was really more like an 8.5-inch hoop, and I had already cut my edge banding for it, which made it too short. I think it's gonna be okay because we're gonna fill the outside, obviously. This will go in the corner, and I don't think we're even gonna be able to see it, and it's gonna be fine. These things happen, so I would definitely recommend measuring everything just to be sure. Okay. That is what a successful embroidery hoop inner will look like. It's not horribly important for it to dry in every single space, just that it gets onto like a few of the corners, because we're gonna put glue on top and put the top on. You just want to make sure that your two edges are lined up evenly to each other. Then on the outer layer, I did the same thing. I brushed the wood glue onto the embroidery hoop, pulled the veneer edge banding taut around the hoop, and secured it in place with some clips. And I'm trying to have my seams be close to each other, but like a little bit overlapped. We're gonna put yarn on there to cover it, so they were on opposite sides. You'd see one of them. This is completely optional, but since the veneer edge banding was iron-on, I used the wood glue to get an initial bond and then turned my iron on to speed things up. If you decide to do this, make sure that your inside and outside edges stay lined up. After doing one hoop to make sure that everything worked, I tried to use an iron to close the seams of each layer of edge banding, but I ran into a couple of issues with that. I did an experiment of doing one of the outer bands. I went in and tried to close the seam with the iron, because it's iron on, right? There's glue there. But what happened is that this started to crack in here. When I don't want it to be cracking, all of a sudden I want it to be nice and smooth. So I think what will have to happen is that I'll have to live with this being open, which I don't think I actually mind that much. It kind of adds a different dimension to things. Once my plan was clear, I pre-cut the rest of the edge banding and did the interior circles first, and then let them dry for a bit before proceeding to the outer circles. After the edge banding was all dried in place, I moved on to yarn, the fun part. I had a couple of colors, a creamy white, a beigey kind of oatmeal color, a black, and these all came from Michaels. And then I had a maroon kind of rust color, as well as a kind of burnt orange rust color. These two had a more of a hairier texture, and ultimately were a little bit more difficult to work with because of that. Took that first trial sample that I tried and added the black to it. And I've added some stripes here, which I'm pretty into, and I might try that on one of the other pieces. Unfortunately, I ran into some glue issues. I was trying to make do with what I had on hand, but the hot glue I had was drying in these kind of clear globs, and the wood glue had this sort of powdery texture to it when it dried. Hang on, it is too cold in here. I thought I could maybe try to hide the hot glue globs with a tighter weave like I had done in my trial piece. So I decided to proceed with the hot glue despite my reservations. You just want to find where your seam is, because that is the side that you want to hide when you're wrapping it. So we're going to work this way. To wrap the yarn, I placed a 1-inch piece of yarn on the inside of the hoop so the edge wouldn't show. And then I just sort of started wrapping, making sure I was starting halfway down on the other side, and continued wrapping going towards the side that had the seam. I thought it was important for me to lay the glue down and pull taut across the outside of the panel and hold down for a few seconds before proceeding to the next wrap. This kept the yarn from pulling the edge banding towards the center of the circle and kept the outside from looking bumpy and uneven like it did in my trial piece. When I reached the curve of the circle, it became even more important to hold the yarn down for a couple of extra seconds to secure it in place so it wouldn't slide down while going on to the next loop. This is why having quick dry glue was so important. To finish off the wrapping, I wound the yarn into a kind of spiral until all of the wood was covered on the side. As you can see, even with the tighter wrapping, the hot glue was still leaving a lot of blobs and wisps that I tried removing with scissors, but was very difficult to get off. I got so frustrated with the hot glue, trying to make that work, that I had to stop and carry on a new day. I went to the hardware store and I picked up some new glues. Let me tell you, the existence of a fast drying clear glue is very small. I picked up this tear mender. It is an instant fabric and leather adhesive that is non-toxic. I picked up this quick dry tacky glue that is like this. They both say they dry clear. I also picked up some crazy glue, but this is definitely not gonna be enough glue for our needs. Let's see what works. The leather and fabric adhesive glue didn't wind up being completely clear, although I don't think you could really tell unless you were looking really carefully. But the tacky glue was perfectly clear. It just didn't dry quite as quickly and wasn't quite as sticky. So it did make some of the wrapping a little bit more time consuming because you had to hold it in place longer before proceeding on to your next loop. But hey, just pop on an audiobook or some TV, keep yourself entertained, and the wrapping will go by like that. I did try to use my crazy glue on the final spiral of one of the pieces, and it did help to get a quicker stick, especially when I was trying to attach yarn to more yarn. After I was done wrapping many yarn hoops over the span of many days, it was finally time for me to lay my hoops out on the floor and start putting together a design of how I wanted them to sit on the wall. I did play with this for quite a while because I was having a lot of trouble deciding if I wanted it to be vertical or horizontal. I did get frustrated at one point and thought I didn't even want to use the little circles, but I wanted to make it my own and I wanted to use all of the pieces that I spent so much time working on. I eventually landed on an arrangement that I liked. I initially wasn't going to glue all of the circles together, but I still couldn't decide if I wanted the piece to be vertical or horizontal and really felt like I needed to see it on the wall before I made that decision. So I did wind up using the fabric tack adhesive to glue the pieces together. You could easily use E6000 or hot glue or whatever strong glue you have on hand. And if you didn't want to glue your pieces together, you could use individual nails to hang the circles on the wall, and that would give you the freedom to rearrange or add to the design in the future, which is what I wanted, but hey, sometimes you're indecisive. And then I measured the area where I wanted the piece to sit on the wall, found the center, and then deliberated for quite a bit longer if I wanted the piece to be vertical or horizontal. Eventually I chose vertical. So let's take a look at how the final piece turned out. I'm actually really happy with how this went. I love that I was able to put my own spin on it and not just straight up copy the original. I love that it's asymmetrical, the different colors that I chose. I love the layers that I did with the yarn that give it so much extra texture and dimension. The mirror in the hallway never felt correctly weighted because I had hooks on one side and then I had this empty spot on the other side. And now the piece can sit there and make everything feel even, and it really livens up the space, adds some new texture and color, and makes the space feel more complete. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. If you did, I would love if you would give it a thumbs up or share it with a friend. This was the first DIY video that I've shot, so it's definitely a little bit of a learning curve, There was a lot of shooting and reshooting and making my editor very angry with me. I hope it was worth it. Thank you for sticking with me. If you liked this as much as I did, subscribe, stay tuned. I'll be putting out new videos every week. I have so many more ideas to share with you. And with that, I will say goodbye. See you next time at the Leopard Lodge.